Welcome to High Heels in the High Country, the program about rural women who are doing amazing things. Now, we normally assume that anybody who's living in the country was born to it. But not always the case. There's many women who are doing amazing things who were born in the city and have had to adapt. And they are doing amazing things, probably even more focused and dedicated than their country-born husbands.
Linda Murchison didn't start life as a country girl. She grew up in the city and went to university where she qualified as an environmental planner. It was only when she was working for the district and regional councils that she met a farmer, married and moved to the country. To swap environmental planning at a council to running a farm might seem like swapping sides, but Linda has an entirely different view.
It seems like that, I think, and a lot of people, a lot of my urban friends sort of say, how do you do the two of them? But actually it's not, it's exactly the same thing. Most farmers, I think that's how I got my first job at Selwyn actually, because I remember saying this in the interview, but it's absolutely true. Most farmers are environmental planners. It's part of what they do, is their everyday lives.
Life on her farm wasn't enough to keep Linda occupied. It was only a matter of time before she became involved with North Canterbury Federated Farmers.
I hesitated a lot. It was Jock, my husband, who said to me, you know, you should do this, you need to do this. And I got involved because we had no meat and fibre rep in North Canterbury, and I was involved in a lot of the environmental stuff with a completely different hat on, and really concerned that there was no one from North Canterbury Federated Farmers other than the staff, who of course work incredibly hard, but no one there with the farming voice. And I thought, we cannot, you know, with everything that's happening in the environmental space and everything that's happening with red meat industry reform, we can't be toddling along a province the size of North Canterbury without a meat and fibre rep. This was crazy. So I sort of got involved, put my hand up and said that I would do it. For my sins, next thing I know, I end up with this job. But yeah, someone had to do it, really.
In addition to being president of North Canterbury Federated Farmers, Linda's also made time to go back to university to study for a PhD in geography.
The PhD for me was always on the cards. I decided after I'd done my masters, so 13 years of school, 5 years of varsity, that was more than enough, and I was going out to the big wide world to get a whole lot of practical experience, and then maybe come back and do a PhD in 5 or 6 years' time, I think was the plan. Well, husbands and children and farms and things intervened, and bits and pieces, and I guess after the earthquakes, after changing jobs and bits and pieces, and I just got to a point where the time was right, really, and I thought, actually I want to do this. The topic finally arrived, and applied for a scholarship. I was lucky enough that the University of Canterbury said yes. That's the trick, you see, you apply when there's not too many students after earthquakes, and they have more scholarships than they have applicants, and they give you one. It's great. And bits and pieces, and so it was quite funny. I was met up with my old lecturer, my old supervisor, and we were just talking because I was thinking about doing this PhD, and he said, well, actually we're looking for a new lecturer to do one of our courses in environmental management, because the person had left who was taking that course. And so I was sort of thinking, oh goodness me. So I ended up, with what's for me is pretty much the dream situation at the moment, doing my PhD and doing some teaching in resource management. So,
Why geography for a PhD?
Because that's what my master's was in, Rob, and you don't get to change. It's quite funny. I'm a history buff, and my dream job would be to be a museum curator, but those jobs don't come along very often, and I ended up, I'd done a double degree in history and geography, and then I ended up doing my master's in geography, again because I got a scholarship, and that was the only way I would have been able to carry on. And so I fell into that whole environmental management side of it, and PhD in geography. But I guess when I think about it, geography is history in a way too. It's the history of how the land is formed and how communities evolve and what they do. So
the list of all the responsibilities Linda has makes exhausting reading. In addition to working on the farm, raising her 2 boys and being president of North Canterbury Federated Farmers, She's lecturing at university and studying for her PhD.
It sounds a lot, but a lot of it is really intertwined. The Federated Farmers stuff, the research that I'm doing for my PhD is very interlinked, a lot of what I'm doing there. And yeah, I guess one of the great things about being married to a farmer is that it lets you have a career in a way that perhaps some other jobs don't. I know, quite a lot of rural women, and I've, heard it's read about it even, sort of previous generations that, mum could go and work in town because dad was home on the farm, so there was someone when the kids got home from school and bits and pieces. So,
where is farming at the moment? Because it has changed dramatically in the last 30 years.
It has, and probably for the last 30 years we've been focused very much on production, and the message that all farmers have had is more production out of your hectares, more outputs for your inputs, because you've got to run as a business. There is no subsidies, we're price takers on a global market, and you've just got to make it work. And we've been very, very good at doing that. And but suddenly we're now in another space where we're facing some challenges that I think are just as significant as removal of subsidies was in the 1984-85, if not more so. Suddenly we are being asked in some pretty quick timeframes to think about a whole lot of things which government policy and the agri-science sector haven't been telling farmers to think about for the last 30 years, and that's about environmental limits and environmental impacts.
It's a different ball game.
It is a different ball game. In some ways, it's the same equation. It just means that as well as talking about your outputs in terms of an economic sense, you've also got to look at your outputs in terms of your environmental externality or your environmental footprint. And a lot of that stuff is actually really good for the bottom line. If you think about, if you're losing phosphorus, if you're losing nitrogen into the environment, that's actually your fertiliser that's going downstream instead of being in the soil doing what you paid for it to do. So there are often some positives as well, but there's a long way to go, and a lot of unanswered questions, and so it's a pretty uncertain time for farmers, and there is a difference between the situation where you can clean up your environmental footprint by being more prudent in your fertiliser use and your water use and things like that, and then the other major challenge which we're facing, which is where we're looking at some land uses that have been established on certain soil types, and now we're scratching our head a bit and saying, is that really the best use from an environmental impact point of view of that particular piece of land? And that's a completely different ball game, of course, because those guys are there and they're established.
Which means we can expect to see and hear a lot more from Linda in the coming years.
Depression is one of the largest issues facing rural communities, and it's not going away. In fact, it's growing.
But I think depression for me, I thought it was a weakness rather than an illness. One of the things I keep saying now is actually an illness. But because you don't treat it and because you can't see it, you really internalise it.
Farming can be very challenging and stressful, and while farmers by nature are very quiet and don't share their emotions very much, Emma Cropper went down to Fairlie to talk to a very public person about a very private issue.
Hundreds of farmers crowding the Fairlie Community Hall as the winter evening sets in. They're not gathered for the usual town meeting. It's the hidden killer of the rural sector that's brought them all together. And rugby legend and depression advocate Sir John Kirwan's leading the discussion.
I had this fantastic life, I was an All Black, I was dead.
Depression is one of the largest issues facing rural communities, and it's not going away. In fact, it's growing. Farmer's daughter Pip O'Neill knows all about it. Her father lost his battle with depression just over a year ago.
Well, we saw Dad going through a whole lot. He had depression for 5 or 6 years before he passed away, and he would just go quiet and go into himself, and we knew when he was having a really tough time, but we never really talked about it because he didn't want anyone to know that he had depression.
The father of 3 ran a 5,500 hectare farm in Otago, always maintaining a staunch persona in front of the family.
Dad to me was on a pedestal, and he was my idol, and I was so proud of him, but I never told, as he did, and I'm sure he knew I loved him and was very proud of him, but we never, the relationship was we'd always talk about rugby and farming and what the racehorses were doing and all those things, rather than me saying, Dad, how are you feeling?
With an outgoing personality, it was the perfectionist within him that began to take over.
His laugh was the laugh you could hear above the crowd, and he was a real fun-loving kind of guy, and I think he just couldn't handle, it was that feeling of the weakness and that feeling of being really down, and not, we tried getting him help, but he just didn't really want to accept it.
Pip opened up to Sir John about her father's battles, but those battles are something JK's all too familiar with himself. Since 2007, Sir John's been an advocate for depression after speaking out about his own fight with the illness.
I was in incredibly bad shape, so for me the reaching out was a real necessity, and once again I just wish I had done it earlier, because I wouldn't have had to go through what I went through, suffering alone, thinking that it was an illness and it was unique to me. So I think, for me, the reaching out part was out of desperation.
He understands the pressure on farmers to fit the stereotypical, staunch, self-reliant male image. But when it comes to depression, he believes it's misunderstood.
I think depression for me, I thought it was a weakness rather than an illness. One of the things I keep saying now is actually an illness. But because you don't treat it and because you can't see it, you really internalise it.
Farming's no longer what it used to be. Gone are the days of running a small family patch of land. Now they're multi-million-dollar businesses. And for those in charge, they face escalating compliance costs and extreme weather combined with the normal stresses of life that just don't help.
An isolation factor, things like your relationships, the finances, the weather, all sorts of things compound it. And it's never usually just one thing, but a series of things that build you to that tipping point where you feel that you can't cope anymore.
18 months ago, Federated Farmers launched this When Life's a Bitch campaign. It's in line with the recent suicide rates. Believe it or not, they're worse in the rural areas than in the urban areas. 16 per 100,000 people take their own life in the rural areas, compared to just over 11 in the urban areas.
It's been one of our best kept secrets for a very, very long time, and it's taken us a really long time to get people out and about and talking about it, and even being able to actually just broach the subject. It's been really hard work.
But farmers are no longer fighting alone. The issue is no longer a secret, and help is not far away. Local support systems are now set up to help as a first port of call when disaster strikes.
We work with farmers who, during an adverse event or on an individual basis where farmers are in need of help. We are all from a rural background, we understand the rural issues, and we're the first line of contact really in difficult times.
Which means these guys, the farmers, the fathers, brothers and sons aren't left to battle alone on the farm, and their wives, sisters and daughters won't be left without the ones they love.
Dad was desperate to get started, and he'd sorted out all the cheese vats and equipment, and I made cheese the day after I arrived home.
Isolation is no longer a barrier for rural women wanting to run their own businesses. generate their own income or financially support their farms. Thanks to the global communications revolution, rural women are increasingly participating in the national economy without leaving the farmhouse. Michelle is one of those women enjoying all the benefits of living in a remote rural location, but working with customers around the country.
This is my wee hobby that I started, it's nearly 2 years now, and it's sort of morphed into this monster. It's the demand of the furniture is, I just keep ordering more containers, and it's just gotten busier and busier.
Michelle might call it a wee hobby, but she's no stranger to running businesses. Over the years, she and her husband have run a craft shop, motels in Hanmer Springs, a garden centre and the Arthur's Pass store. Her business, Woven Veranda, imports and sells a range of garden and conservatory furniture woven with natural and synthetic wicker, all without Michelle leaving the comfort of her farmhouse.
I started my own website, which is very easy to do. If you do an MYOB, it's like colour by numbers. You just follow the instructions and it's easy. So I just started with that, and social media now, using Facebook and and Twitter and that sort of thing. And so it doesn't take very long before you get this little following, and Pinterest and things like that. It's a local lady here that works with people for the technical side of their websites and things, so she gives me a hand every now and then, but it's great, and I don't have to go anywhere.
And people just they send you money?
They email me, and they say, can you send me more pictures or measurements? And so I go out and I take photographs and I measure things and send it back, and I send furniture all over the country.
What started with a range of garden and conservatory furniture quickly expanded to include a range of smaller decorating items such as throws and baskets, because Michelle saw an opportunity.
There's little voids and gaps in the containers when they're sent over, and so rather than having empty space in the top of the containers, I just say to the fellows at the factory, can you find me some interesting things? And so they came up with the ducks and the lovely placemats, and I get baskets, so there's no waste space. I've moved into a few cushions and blankets, because when I'm doing a display, I use those as my props, and then people want to buy them, so then I decided, well, I'll have more. And that's how that's happened. Yeah, which is great fun.
What's your advice to somebody who wants to help support a farm or a property or is bored?
First, I think women are great because they know what they love. So you talk to your friends and what would you really like? What are you finding hard to find? And particularly in Christchurch in the last couple of years, people have said to me, there's not the selection. So you have a look online, and with importing now, it's very easy, and you can find things, gorgeous things, and have them sent over, and you can set up your own website and have some fun. I don't invest too much to begin with and let it grow. It's great. It's great fun.
So the website is obviously the key.
I think so. It's very easy. Everybody looks, well, most people do. They search the web before they buy anything, and so long as you get your keywords and everything right, and you've got a good product, that's the most important thing. It does it itself.
With the business running so well, it might seem tempting to move the business into retail premises in town. However, Michelle has no interest in exchanging her rural-based business lifestyle for the hassle of working in the city.
For me to work in town, I just didn't want to do that, and I didn't want to do nothing because it's boring, and I didn't want to work every day. So some days I want to do more, so I'll tweak my photographs or I'll fix things up on the website. And then other days it's a lovely day, so the girls up the road might want to go and play golf, or we'll have a game of tennis or something, and we don't do anything. I don't do anything. And there's a couple of other girls that are doing similar things. There's another lady that's doing art. She's got her own art and she's doing it on the website. And there's another lady that's doing her own pickles and jams and things, and she's doing it that way as well. So it's a good pocket money, and it's and you meet some lovely people.
Dairying may be taking over the Canterbury Plains as far as cattle are concerned, but there's another type of milk producer, a lot smaller, a lot more adorable, and making some amazing cheese, as we found out when we went to see Anna at Green Park.
Here's a conundrum. What do you do when you've heard of dairy goats producing litres of milk a day, but no one wants to buy it? If you're smart, you'd ask your daughter, who happens to have a degree in microbiology and is working in London, to find out all they can about dairy goats.
I travelled around the country visiting goat farms and cheese factories. I did a cheese course. The people who ran that course, they ran the World Cheese Awards as well. So I did that 3 years running and learnt an awful lot about expert judges in the field. And then I got a job as a cheesemaker in a little cheese factory in Norfolk.
After 6 months of cheese making in Norfolk, acquiring skills and expertise, Anna boarded a plane and headed back to her father's farm in Green Park, and not a moment too soon.
Dad was desperate to get started, and he'd sorted out all the cheese vats and equipment, and I made cheese the day after I arrived home.
Was that nerve-wracking? Because you'd only had 6 months of hands-on.
Yeah, it was, but I knew I didn't have any choice. We were putting milk down the drain at that stage, so we just had to swim. But I did start off with the exact same recipes that I'd been making in England, and I moved on from there as I grew in confidence.
Anna's confidence led her to experiment with cheese styles and varieties.
Well, after those first 4, which were like a feta, a blue, a cheddar variety and a sort of Gouda style, after that I've been accumulating cheese books ever since, and I've got a real library of these. And every winter I'll look through the books and earmark the pages, and I think, oh, that cheese looks interesting, or that'd be a good addition to our range. Always trying to make something that's significantly different so that we've got something to offer everyone. But even so, now that we've got 15 different varieties, there will still be people who ask, oh, have you got a mozzarella or something or other that we don't have? So sometimes you can never win, but we do try.
But why try producing goat's milk in the first place? What has goat's milk got that dairy cow milk doesn't have?
The comparison nutritionally, a goat's cheese coming from goat's milk is better for you than cows in many ways. It's a lot more digestible, so anyone who has trouble digesting milk may get on better with a goat milk product. Anyone that has a health condition, anyone with eczema, asthma, any complaint such as that is going to go better on a goat milk product. It's also a little bit less fattening and lower in cholesterol.
Which is great for the health conscious, but New Zealanders can be very taste conscious. So have they developed a taste for goat's cheese?
We thought that the New Zealanders had a very timid palate, so I was very adamant that I wanted our cheeses to be mild to suit them. And I think that was the right thing to do back then, but then as people's palates changed, people travelled more and we had more people here from overseas, I noticed that demand was for stronger cheeses. So we started to make stronger cheeses as well as the mild ones. So again, it comes back to having a wide variety of cheeses to suit everyone.
So initially it was what Anna wanted and liked, and then it became what the customer liked.
That's right, yeah. I wanted to be able to sell a product that I liked, but my taste changed as well, I think, and I got more adventurous, so it worked well.
The proof is in the awards Anna's Gruff Junction cheeses have accumulated.
We've been in the awards since the very beginning. Initially we thought it important to get feedback from the judges, and that still is the case, but the awards, if you're lucky enough to score them, are really helpful in marketing. If you go into a supermarket or any other shop, farmer's market even, and you see medals on a cheese, you think, oh, that must be good. Other people have given that a high score, so it definitely helps.
Though these guys probably don't mind either way.
So that's this week's High Heels in the High Country. We'll be back again next week introducing some very interesting women and the odd boy as well.